My stepdaughter accused me of spying on her, said I had a hidden camera in the guest room. My wife believed her. I lost access to my own house. A week later, the police came with a warrant. They found the camera, but it was hidden behind my wedding photo. And it wasn't mine. My wife asked me to leave anyway. So there I was, Dave Matthews, 42 years old, thinking life had finally dealt me a decent hand. 3 years married to Sarah, a woman who actually laughed at my terrible jokes and didn't mind that I left coffee rings on every surface. Her daughter Zoe was 17, smart as hell, and while we weren't exactly buddies, we got along fine. I worked construction, Sarah taught middle school, and we had this nice little house in the suburbs where everything seemed normal. That Tuesday started like any other. I got home around 6, boots caked with mud, ready for a beer and whatever leftovers Sarah had waiting. But the house felt wrong the second I walked in. You know that feeling when the air itself seems thick? Sarah was standing in the kitchen, arms crossed, and Zoe was behind her looking like she'd been crying. Sarah didn't even let me get my boots off before she started. Zoe had apparently been feeling uncomfortable in the guest room for weeks, like someone was watching her. She'd been sleeping there since we converted her old room into Sarah's home office. The kid claimed she'd found a small hole in the wall behind the dresser, barely visible, and when she looked closer with her phone flashlight, she swore she saw a lens. My first reaction was to laugh. I mean, come on. Hidden cameras? This wasn't some spy thriller. But Sarah's face told me laughing was the absolute wrong move. Zoe was adamant. She'd taken pictures of the hole, measurements, the whole 9 yards. She'd even researched online and found that tiny spy cameras could be hidden anywhere. The worst part was how logical she made it sound. I was the one who'd helped set up that guest room. I was the one with access to the house during the day when they were both at school and work. I was the one who knew about electronics from my days doing electrical work before construction. Every innocent thing I'd ever done suddenly looked suspicious through their eyes. Sarah wanted to call the police right then. I begged her to let me look first, to give me a chance to prove this was all some misunderstanding. Maybe it was just a nail hole or damage from when we'd moved furniture around. But when I went to examine the wall, even I had to admit the hole looked deliberately made. It was perfectly round, about the size of a pinhole camera lens, positioned at exactly the right height to capture the bed. That night, Sarah made me sleep on the couch. She said she needed time to think, but I could see in her eyes that she was already thinking the worst. Zoe wouldn't even look at me. The trust we'd built over 3 years evaporated in a single evening. I lay there staring at the ceiling, wondering how my life had turned into an episode of some twisted reality show. The next morning, Sarah told me I needed to find somewhere else to stay while they figured things out. She'd already called her sister Janet, and they were coming to get me that afternoon. I packed a bag feeling like a criminal in my own home. The worst part was that nagging voice in my head asking if maybe, just maybe, there really was a camera and I somehow didn't know about it. But that was impossible. I'd know if I put a camera there, right? I drove to my buddy Rick's apartment feeling like my entire world had collapsed in 24 hours. Rick worked nights at the factory, so I had his couch and most of the day to myself to go crazy thinking about what was happening. I called in sick to work because I couldn't concentrate on anything except this nightmare scenario where everyone I loved thought I was some kind of perverted creep. The thing that kept eating at me was how quickly Sarah had believed Zoe over me. I understood protecting your kid, but 3 years of marriage apparently counted for nothing when push came to shove. Every time I'd helped with homework, every family dinner, every time I'd driven Zoe to school or picked her up from friends' houses, all of it was now viewed through this lens of suspicion. I kept replaying every interaction I'd had with Zoe over the past few months, looking for any sign that she'd been building up to this accusation. Had I said something that made her uncomfortable? Had I been too friendly, too distant? The analysis was driving me insane because I couldn't find anything that would explain why she'd think I was capable of something so disgusting. Sarah texted me exactly once that first week. Police are coming Thursday. Don't contact us until this is resolved. That was it. No, I love you. No. I hope this is all a mistake. Just a cold, clinical message that made my stomach drop into my boots. I realized then that even if this got cleared up somehow, our marriage might not survive the accusation itself. Living at Rick's apartment felt like being in witness protection. Rick was good about it, but I could tell he was uncomfortable having someone accused of voyeurism sleeping on his couch. He didn't say anything directly, but he started locking his bedroom door at night and stopped leaving his laptop out when I was around. I couldn't focus on work. My foreman, Tony Castellanos, had to send me home twice because I nearly walked into traffic while carrying lumber. The third time it happened, Tony pulled me aside and asked if I was having problems at home. I told him what was going on, and he just nodded like he'd seen this kind of thing before. Tony had been through his own divorce years back, and he told me something that stuck with me. He said that when trust breaks in a family, It doesn't matter who's right or wrong anymore. The damage spreads like cracks in a foundation until the whole structure becomes unstable. He gave me the rest of the week off and told me to get my head straight. I started doing my own investigation because sitting around was driving me crazy. I went back through everything that had happened in the past few months. Had anyone else been in the house? Had I noticed anything strange? The only person I could think of was Janet's boyfriend, Vincent Webb. He'd been around a few times, helping with yard work and fixing Sarah's car. Nice enough guy, worked in IT, always seemed helpful. But thinking about Vincent made me remember something weird. Last month, he'd offered to help me install a new smoke detector in the hallway. Said he had the right tools, and it would be easier with 2 people. I'd thought nothing of it at the time, but now I wondered why he'd been so eager to help with something I could easily do myself. The more I thought about it, the more things seemed off. Vincent always seemed to know when Sarah and Zoe would be home, even when plans changed last minute. He'd show up with coffee for Sarah exactly when she was having a bad day. He remembered details about Zoe's school schedule that even I sometimes forgot. At the time, I'd chalked it up to him being attentive and caring about Sarah's family. Now it felt creepy. Vincent had been particularly interested in our security system when we'd had it upgraded 6 months ago. He'd asked a lot of questions about the cameras outside, the motion sensors, how the monitoring worked. Sarah had mentioned that he'd even offered to help us get a better deal through his IT connections, but we'd already signed a contract. I remembered another weird thing. Vincent had been at our house the weekend we'd rearranged the guest room furniture. He'd volunteered to help move the heavy dresser, and he'd spent a lot of time measuring the wall space and talking about optimal furniture placement. He'd even taken pictures with his phone, claiming he wanted to help Sarah redecorate the room later. I started following Vincent. I know how that sounds, but I was desperate. Thursday morning, instead of going to work, I parked across from his apartment complex and waited. He left at his usual time, but instead of heading toward his office, he drove to our neighborhood. He parked 3 blocks away and walked past our house twice, checking his phone each time. That's when I called Detective Rodriguez. I'd gotten her number from Sarah, and while she was initially reluctant to talk to me directly, she agreed to meet at a coffee shop downtown. Rodriguez was younger than I'd expected, maybe early 30s, with the kind of sharp eyes that missed nothing. She told me the search warrant was already approved. They'd be at the house that afternoon, and if they found anything, I'd be arrested immediately. She also mentioned something that made my blood run cold. They'd been monitoring my phone and internet activity since the complaint was filed. Nothing suspicious so far, but they'd found something interesting in the metadata of the photos Zoe had taken of the hole. The photos had been taken 2 weeks ago, but the hole itself appeared to be much older based on the wear patterns around the edges. Someone had made that hole months ago, possibly when we first moved into the house. Rodriguez asked if I'd ever noticed Vincent taking particular interest in the guest room setup. I told her about Vincent's behavior, his knowledge of our schedules, his eagerness to help with home improvement projects. Rodriguez took notes and said they'd look into it, but I could tell she still considered me the primary suspect. She warned me not to contact Vincent directly or do anything that could be construed as witness intimidation. I spent the rest of that day pacing Rick's apartment, waiting for the phone call that would either clear my name or destroy my life completely. Every time I heard sirens in the distance, I wondered if they were coming for me. The worst part was knowing that somewhere across town, police were going through my house, my personal belongings, looking for evidence that I was a predator. Thursday afternoon felt like waiting for execution. I sat in Rick's apartment, drinking coffee and watching the clock, knowing that somewhere across town, police were tearing apart my life looking for evidence of crimes I didn't commit. My phone rang at 3:47 p.m. It was Rodriguez. They'd found the camera. My heart stopped. But then she said something that changed everything. The camera wasn't where Zoe said she'd seen the hole. It was hidden behind our wedding photo in the living room, positioned to capture the entire main floor of the house, including the kitchen, living room, and hallway leading to the bedrooms. The camera was professional grade, wireless, with enough memory to store months of footage. It had been recording everything. Every conversation, every argument, every private moment Sarah and I had shared in our own home. But here's the kicker that made Rodriguez call me immediately instead of issuing a warrant for my arrest. The camera's internal clock showed it had been installed 8 months ago. I'd been on a 2-week job site in another state 8 months ago, staying in a company trailer with 3 other guys who could verify my whereabouts every single day. There was no way I could have installed that camera. More importantly, when they examined the footage stored on the device, they found something that made Rodriguez's voice tight with anger. The camera had been accessed remotely multiple times over the past 6 months, always from the same IP address. An IP address registered to Vincent Webb. But that wasn't the mind-blowing part. The mind-blowing part was what Vincent had been doing with the footage. He'd been editing together clips of Sarah's daily routine, creating a detailed profile of her schedule, her habits, her vulnerabilities. He knew when she showered, when she was home alone, when she was upset about work. He'd been building a case study of her life. Rodriguez told me to meet her at the station immediately. They'd already sent units to Vincent's apartment and workplace, but he was gone. His landlord said he'd cleaned out his stuff that morning and left no forwarding address. His boss at the IT company said he'd called in sick for the rest of the week. At the station, Rodriguez showed me some of the footage on a secure computer. Watching myself in my own home, unknowing and unaware that every moment was being recorded, felt like a violation I can't even describe. But worse was seeing Sarah and Zoe living their lives while this creep documented their every move. Then Rodriguez showed me the really disturbing part. Vincent had been in our house multiple times when we weren't there. The footage showed him entering through the back door with a key, walking around, going through our mail, our personal items. He'd been in Zoe's room, handling her clothes, her school books. He'd photographed documents, identification cards, Sarah's teaching materials. But the absolute worst discovery was a folder on Vincent's work computer that police had seized. It contained edited video clips organized by date and subject. Sarah morning routine. Sarah emotional breakdown March 15th. Zoe homework time. Zoe getting dressed. That last folder made me want to put my fist through something. Vincent hadn't just been spying on us. He'd been grooming the situation, creating a scenario where suspicion would fall on me if the camera was ever discovered. The hole Zoe found in the guest room wall, Vincent had drilled that as a red herring, making it look like someone was specifically targeting that room. He'd counted on the natural assumption that the stepfather would be the prime suspect. Rodriguez explained that Vincent had used his IT expertise to hack into our home security system months ago. He'd disabled the motion sensors on nights when he entered the house, edited the footage from our outdoor cameras to hide his presence, and used his access to study our routines until he knew exactly when it was safe to enter. The most chilling part was how long he'd been planning this. Rodriguez showed me evidence that Vincent had been researching our family for almost a year before he started dating Janet. He'd found Sarah through her school's website, learned about her divorce, her new marriage to me, and Zoe's age and school schedule. He'd specifically targeted Janet as a way to get close to our family. Vincent had created fake social media profiles to friend request Zoe, Sarah, and even me. He'd been monitoring our posts, our photos, our check-ins at restaurants and events. He knew more about our daily lives than some of our closest friends. The surveillance camera was just the final step in a comprehensive stalking operation that had been going on for months. Rodriguez told me that Vincent's real name was Gary Hoffman, and he had a history of similar crimes in 2 other states. He'd been using different identities to get close to families, install surveillance equipment, and then disappear before anyone suspected him. Our family wasn't his first victim, and we probably wouldn't have been his last. The evidence against Vincent was overwhelming. Video footage of him entering our house, his fingerprints on items inside our home, the IP address records showing his remote access to the camera, and the edited video files on his computer. But catching him was proving more difficult because he'd had time to prepare his escape. By Friday morning, Vincent Webb had become the target of a multi-state manhunt. The FBI got involved when they discovered he'd been doing similar surveillance operations in 2 other states over the past 5 years. He had a pattern of befriending single mothers or women in new relationships, gaining access to their homes, and then documenting their lives obsessively. But Vincent had made one crucial mistake. He'd gotten too confident, too comfortable with his system. When police analyzed the camera's wireless signals, they found he'd been streaming live feeds to his phone whenever he was nearby. Cell tower data placed his phone near our house at times when he claimed to be elsewhere, including Tuesday night after Zoe had confronted Sarah and me about the camera. Rodriguez called me with an update that made my skin crawl. Vincent had been parked outside our house Tuesday night, watching through his phone as our family fell apart. He'd probably been getting off on the chaos he'd created, the perfect crime where the husband gets blamed and he gets to comfort the devastated wife. The manhunt intensified when they discovered Vincent's real background. His name wasn't actually Vincent Webb. It was Gary Hoffman, and he had a juvenile record for breaking and entering that had been sealed when he turned 18. He'd been using fake identities for years, moving from city to city, targeting vulnerable families. The FBI found evidence that Vincent had been operating under at least 6 different identities over the past decade. He'd had fake driver's licenses, social security numbers, and employment records for each identity. His IT skills had allowed him to create convincing background checks and references that fooled employers and landlords across multiple states. Vincent's pattern was always the same. He'd research potential victims online, find a way to get close to the family through friends or relatives, gain access to their homes under the pretense of helping with repairs or improvements, and then install surveillance equipment. He'd document their lives for months before moving on to the next target. Sarah called me Friday evening. Her voice was shaky, exhausted, and filled with an apology that sounded like it was tearing her apart. She'd seen the police reports, understood the scope of what Vincent had done to our family. She wanted me to come home, but I could hear in her voice that something had fundamentally changed between us. When I got to the house, Sarah and Zoe were sitting at the kitchen table with Detective Rodriguez and a victim's advocate counselor named Karen. The atmosphere was heavy with the weight of violation and betrayal. Rodriguez explained that Vincent had likely chosen our family specifically because of the stepfather dynamic, knowing it would create natural suspicion and division. But then Rodriguez told us something that changed everything again. They'd tracked Vincent to a motel outside the city, but when they got there, they found something that suggested he wasn't planning to run much further. His room contained detailed floor plans of our house, Sarah's school, and Zoe's high school. He'd been planning something bigger than just surveillance. The evidence suggested Vincent was escalating. The camera had been just the beginning. He'd purchased items that indicated he was planning to actually enter our home while we were there. Restraints, sedatives, equipment that suggested his obsession was moving from watching to acting. Rodriguez showed us printouts of Vincent's online purchases over the past month. Zip ties, duct tape, chloroform, and something called a stun gun. He'd also bought detailed maps of our neighborhood, night vision equipment, and lock-picking tools. The plan seemed to involve breaking into our house while we were asleep. They caught him Sunday morning at a truck stop 50 miles away. He was sitting in his car, watching live feeds from other cameras he'd installed in houses across 3 states. When police arrested him, he was calm, almost relieved. He told Detective Rodriguez that he'd been planning to come back to our house that night. He said he was tired of just watching. The arrest was anticlimactic. Vincent didn't resist or try to run. He just sat there as they put the handcuffs on, looking almost bored. Rodriguez said it was common for serial offenders like him to feel a sense of relief when they were finally caught. The constant planning and hiding becomes exhausting after years of operation. During his interrogation, Vincent confessed to everything. He admitted to installing cameras in 11 different homes across 3 states. He'd been documenting families for his own gratification, but also selling some of the footage to online networks that trafficked in voyeuristic content. Our family's private moments had been broadcast to strangers across the internet. The trial lasted 8 months. Vincent pleaded guilty to multiple charges including stalking, breaking and entering, unlawful surveillance, and attempted kidnapping. He was sentenced to 15 years in prison with no possibility of parole for the first 10 years. But here's the thing nobody talks about in these stories. Even when the bad guy gets caught and justice is served, the damage doesn't just disappear. Sarah and I went through months of counseling, but the trust between us never fully recovered. Every time she looked at me, I could see a flicker of doubt, a memory of those days when she believed I was capable of violating our family's privacy. Zoe was even worse. The revelation that Vincent had been in her room, handling her things, watching her private moments, left her with anxiety and trust issues that required years of therapy. She moved in with her biological father 6 months after the trial ended. She said she couldn't feel safe in the house anymore, couldn't look at me without remembering how readily everyone had believed I was the predator. The house itself became a source of constant anxiety. Every creaking sound at night made us wonder if someone was breaking in. We had the security system completely replaced, changed all the locks, and even moved our bedroom to a different part of the house. But the feeling of violation never really went away. Sarah and I divorced 2 years later. Not because either of us wanted to, but because the foundation of our relationship had been poisoned by Vincent's manipulation. We'd been turned against each other so effectively that even knowing the truth couldn't repair the damage. Sarah kept the house, and I moved to another state for a fresh start. The financial cost was devastating too. Legal fees, therapy costs, security upgrades, and the eventual divorce proceedings wiped out most of our savings. Vincent had stolen more than our privacy. He'd stolen our financial security, our sense of safety, and ultimately our family's future together. The final twist came 3 years after Vincent's arrest. Detective Rodriguez called to tell me that Vincent had been killed in prison by another inmate who discovered his crimes against children. She thought I should know, in case it brought some sense of closure. It didn't. Justice felt hollow when my family was still scattered across 3 states, when Zoe still needed therapy to sleep through the night, when Sarah and I had to communicate through lawyers about selling our old house because neither of us could bear to live there anymore. Vincent Webb, or Gary Hoffman, or whatever his real name was, had gotten exactly what he wanted in the end. He destroyed a family, turned us against each other, and left scars that would never fully heal. The camera was just the tool. The real weapon was the suspicion and doubt he'd planted in our hearts. Even now, 5 years later, I sometimes catch myself checking hotel rooms for hidden cameras or wondering if someone is watching when I'm alone in my apartment. Vincent's violation of our privacy created a permanent paranoia that affects every relationship I try to build. The trust that most people take for granted was stolen from us, and we never really got it back. And that's the story. If you're still here, that means you're one of us. So go ahead, hit that subscribe button. I drop new chaos every single day, and trust me, tomorrow's story, it's even worse than this one.